When you're staring out of a tiny airplane window at 35,000 feet, the world looks incredibly peaceful, doesn't it? Below you, the clouds look like a solid floor, and it feels as though the plane is gliding effortlessly through a limitless ocean of blue. But that peace is actually a carefully engineered illusion. For the pilots up front, that altitude isn't just a random choice. It's a sanctuary. It's a very specific point where the laws of physics and the limits of aluminum and titanium play nice together. But have you ever wondered what happens if you get greedy? What if you decide to push that nose up and keep climbing, trying to reach for the stars? Well, you'd quickly find out that the sky has an invisible ceiling, and it's a place where the rules of flight turn into a nightmare. To understand why we can't just keep going up, we have to talk about the very air we're moving through. We tend to think of the atmosphere as this big, consistent blanket, but it's more like a fading ghost. At sea level, the air is thick and comforting, pushing against everything with a pressure of about 101 kilopascals. But by the time you reach 10 kilometers, the height of a standard flight, 2/3 of that pressure has simply vanished. This thinning air is the master architect of every limit a plane has. It decides how much lift those wings can grab, how much oxygen the engines can swallow, and quite literally whether your body stays in one piece or becomes a biological casualty. In the world of aviation, there is a term that sounds like something out of a horror movie: the Coffin Corner. And honestly, the name is pretty accurate. As a plane climbs into the thin, high-altitude air, it enters a terrifyingly narrow aerodynamic hallway. To stay in the air when the molecules are sparse, you have to fly fast. I mean really fast. This is your stall speed. But here's the catch. As you speed up to stay aloft, you start approaching the critical Mach number. This is the point where the air flowing over your wings actually hits the speed of sound. This creates violent, chaotic shock waves that can vibrate the entire fuselage until it literally tears itself apart. On a typical commercial jet at its absolute ceiling, the gap between falling out of the sky because you're too slow and disintegrating, because you're too fast, can be as narrow as 5 knots. That's less than 10 kilometers per hour. One sudden gust of wind or a tiny slip of the hand, and the plane becomes a multi-ton brick that you simply cannot recover. While the wings are struggling with the air, the engines are fighting a losing battle of their own. Think of a jet engine as a giant, continuous controlled explosion. For that explosion to happen, it needs a massive, steady diet of oxygen. As you push toward 60,000 feet, the air becomes so rare that the engine can't breathe anymore. This leads to a flame out. The fire inside just goes out, like a candle in a vacuum. And it gets worse. Because the air is so thin, it's a terrible heat conductor. Those turbine blades, spinning at thousands of revolutions per minute, start to overheat and warp even as they're producing less and less thrust. If your power cuts out at that height, you don't get a graceful glide. You fall like a stone until you hit air thick enough for a desperate restart, assuming your engines haven't already turned into a puddle of molten metal. Then there's the plane itself. Think of the fuselage as a pressurized soda can. To keep everyone comfortable, the interior is pressurized to feel like you're on a nice mountain about 2,400 meters up. But outside at high altitude, it's a near vacuum. Every single meter you climb increases that pressure difference, stretching the metal skin, and putting immense stress on every single rivet and seam. If that structure fails at 50,000 feet, you get what's called explosive decompression. For the people inside, the time of useful consciousness is terrifyingly short, usually less than 15 seconds. You wouldn't even have time to realize you're in trouble and reach for your oxygen mask before your brain simply shuts down from lack of oxygen. But if you keep going, you hit the ultimate biological wall, the Armstrong line at about 19,000 meters. This is where conventional physics ends and true biological horror begins. At this altitude, the atmospheric pressure is so incredibly low that the boiling point of water drops to exactly 37 degrees Celsius. If you remember your biology, that's your body temperature. Without a pressurized suit, the moisture on your tongue, in your lungs, and eventually the very fluids in your blood would start to vaporize and boil. This isn't just a limit for a machine. It is the absolute edge of human existence. And we haven't even mentioned the silent killer, cosmic radiation. The next time you're on a flight, remember? You are traveling on a very thin line between engineering genius and the laws of the universe. Stay safe.